Welcome back to another episode of The Road Chose Me. My name's Dan Grech, and today I'm going to talk through the reasons why I think you should work on your own vehicle. Whether it's when you're installing upgrades, whether you're doing routine maintenance, or when you're repairing problems along the way, I think it's really important that you do as much of that as you can yourself. And don't worry if you're not a trained mechanic, neither am I. It's actually not that difficult. So I'll run through all of the reasons why I think it's really critical. Stick around, let's get into it right now. As I talk today, I'll overlay some footage of the work I've recently been doing on the Jeep. So I have to put it in storage here pretty soon so I can leave the continent. And there's a few little jobs that I've been meaning to do for quite a while. The first one you'll see me do is a front wheel speed sensor on the front left. And this wheel speed sensor, it helps the computer run the ABS and the traction control. So it's been a little bit fritzy for the last few months, and now recently those lights are on the dash permanently. So it's time for me to change that sensor out. It was an $8 part, it's not a big deal, but it did take me about an hour to get the whole job done start to finish. As well as that, I need to top up the oil in the front diff. Because it does leak a little bit, I like to just keep it topped up, make sure it doesn't get low. And I'll do an engine oil change as well. Because I'm putting the Jeep in storage for about a year and a half, really good idea to store it with fresh oil, not slightly used oil. As oil gets older, it gets a whole bunch of kind of nasty contaminants, and the chemicals inside of it break down and they get corrosive. So the fresher the oil you can store it with, that's better for it. When it comes to working on your own vehicle, I think it's important to point out, I'm not just talking about once you're on the road, I'm talking about long before you ever leave home. So when you first buy your vehicle or when you're first starting to modify it or upgrade it, I think it's really important that you do as much of that work yourself as you can. And so there's a bunch of reasons for this. And the first one is just to give yourself confidence that you understand what's going on. You know, when I upgraded the suspension on this thing, I had never actually replaced shocks and coil springs. I thought I knew how to do it, but I wasn't sure. But I worked through the really detailed instruction list, I understood where all the bolts were, and it made sure that I had all of the tools that I needed to actually make that happen. And it was really interesting because while I had big sockets to put on one end, I didn't necessarily have the ring spanner or the wrench to put on the backside. So I actually had to go and buy some big ones. I think they were 22 or 21 millimeter to hold the bolt while I was trying to loosen or tighten the nut. If I didn't do that work myself, I would have hit the road with no ability to get those bolts on and off myself. So that was really important. Same story goes for when it comes to doing an oil change, whether that's just on the engine or when I came to do the transfer case and the transmission, it turned out I needed a special hex nut to do that. And for the transmission in this thing with the 6-speed, you get an Allen wrench, but you actually cut it down a little bit so it'll fit between the exhaust and the transmission. It just makes the job easier so you don't have to take the exhaust off. Again, if I didn't do that job myself before I hit the road and went to Africa, I never would have known. And it would have been halfway around Africa needing to change the transmission oil, but with no ability to do it myself. And what are the chances that some guy on the side of the road in Africa is going to have the exact Allen wrench and he's going to be willing to cut it down to size so it can fit? No, there's no chance of that happening. So not only does it build your confidence and your knowledge of what's going on, it also makes sure that you have the right tools and that you'll be prepared when it's time to do whatever routine maintenance comes up along the way. Same story goes, if there happens to be a breakdown or some sort of mechanical problem along the way, you're going to feel confident that you understand the various systems of the vehicle and which parts of them you've already worked on, so you know exactly what it looks like, you understand. If you get a rock caught in the brakes, you'll say, oh yeah, well, last time I changed the brake pads, it wasn't even that difficult. So you'll be confident to just dive right in there. You could pull the brake pads right out. That'll be sure to clear any rocks that are jammed in there. Then you put it all back together again, just like last time. So you'll get this confidence that you understand what's happening. Of course, another reason that you want to do your own work is to make sure that it's done properly. And you might say you're not a mechanic, so you don't know if it'll be done properly, but trust me, doing it yourself, even if you're not a mechanic, you're going to do a better job probably than a lot of guys on the side of the road. And that's because once you're down in Latin America, once you're in Africa, there's kind of a different mentality. They don't necessarily have the right tools for the job, but they're interested in getting it done. So when they get to a bolt, they don't have the right socket to get that bolt off. That's not going to slow them down. They're just going to use a pair of vice grips, or they're going to hit it with a hammer and a screwdriver. They're going to do whatever it takes to get it off. And if they damage it along the way, oh, well, that was kind of necessary to get the job done. That's kind of more the mentality. So pretty quickly, you'll see vehicles that have been worked on a lot in Latin America or in Africa. They're just slowly getting damaged and destroyed by using the wrong tools, by hitting things with hammers, by just welding things that aren't supposed to be welded, so on and so forth. So trusting someone else to do the work for you, it's a little bit risky because you never know if it's going to be done in a really sort of backyard dodgy fashion, and it's actually going to make the problem worse, not make the problem better. Another great reason to do all of your own work is that you'll develop an affinity for your vehicle and you'll be more connected to its quirks, to its noises, to the peculiarities of your vehicle and how your vehicle behaves. And the best example I have of that from my Jeep is the fact that the front diff does leak a little bit of oil and I have to top it up from time to time. And this is actually not a bad thing because it means I crawl underneath and I have a good look around. I make sure that all the suspension pieces are straight. I grab onto the tie rod, I grab onto everything I can down there and make sure that it all looks sane. Then I check the level of oil in the front diff and I'm always expecting it to be down a fraction, and that's fine, I top it up a fraction. But if I was ever to do that job and I found that the diff oil was basically empty, that would be a huge problem. I would say, wow, it's suddenly leaking way more than it was. And that, to me, means that I'm more connected and I understand what's happening. And there's a certain expected amount of deterioration, but then there's kind of, wow, this is not normal, I need to investigate further. Same things when I'm doing a tire rotation. It gives me a great chance to have a look around, make sure that everything's straight, and I can inspect the brake pads as well, see how worn they are. And in my mind, I can start planning ahead and saying, oh, the brakes are fine for another 10 or 20,000 miles. Or I look and say, in 6,000 miles at the next tire rotation, I'll probably need new brake pads. So I should start planning already. Where am I going to get those brake pads? And look ahead on the map, try to figure out what country I'm going to be in, try to start planning how I'll make that job happen. Otherwise, you might get down to the Congo and suddenly you hear metal on your brakes because you weren't keeping an eye on things and you haven't planned ahead. And trust me, when you're in the Congo, getting brake pads is not going to be straightforward for any vehicle, even if you drive a Toyota. So suddenly you're going to find yourself in the Congo in desperate need of brake pads. That's going to be stressful, that's going to be hard to deal with. You probably didn't get a visa for more than a week anyway, so you might not even be able to do it in the Congo. All of a sudden now your trip starts to be more trouble than enjoyment. So this kind of planning ahead, and if you stay connected to your vehicle, you can plan ahead like this and you'll avoid all of those kind of stressful last minute scenarios. And in fact, I planned ahead and I saw, oh yeah, the brakes are getting a little bit thin. I'll have some ready for me when I get to South Africa. Then I changed the brake pads down in South Africa. No problem, no stress. That was really easy. And the final reason that I really love working on my own vehicle is that it does bring me quite a bit of enjoyment. And sitting in the dirt, getting covered in oil, when I snap bolts, when kind of all the rust flakes fall down in my eyes, none of that stuff is enjoyable. But kind of in the bigger overall existential sense, I enjoy working on my own vehicle because it means I'm not just paying somebody else. Because in the back of my mind, I know if I'm paying somebody else, that's less money for gas in the tank, that's more time I'll have to go to work, that's less adventures. So even if it takes me a couple of hours, that still works out better time-wise than spending a couple of hours at work, but then losing money from taxes, then paying someone to make a profit, then paying someone for the markup on the parts, and all of that kind of stuff. So doing it myself, it just makes me feel happier. And at the end of the day, when I sit back and I'm on the side of a logging road like this, I look at the Jeep and I say, yeah, that wheel speed sensor, it's going to be good for another 200,000 miles. I know that that's done now, and I can feel relaxed and confident that it's something I won't have to think about for a long time. And I know that working on your vehicle can feel a bit daunting. I certainly was a little bit timid the first time I tried to dive into a job like changing the brake pads, because the brakes are fairly important, you want them to work well. but it's actually really straightforward. Vehicles, especially big four-wheel drives like this, they really are just big bolts. Get yourself a Haynes repair manual. Obviously you can learn a lot from YouTube these days. I actually watched a YouTube on how to do the wheel speed sensor on this Jeep before I went and did it myself. So if you're willing to put in a bit of time, a little bit of learning as you go along, you really will be able to figure out most jobs, and you'll be surprised to learn that many of them aren't that difficult and you really will get them done successfully. So I hope that's been helpful, and I hope it gets you thinking about the things you need to do and the knowledge you need to have so that you can rely on your vehicle, so that it's trustworthy, so that you have confidence in it when you're driving across the salt flats of Bolivia or when you're up in the Arctic Circle in Alaska. You know your vehicle and you understand it. Even if there is a problem, you're going to feel confident about diving in and tackling it, at least to be able to diagnose the problem, potentially remove whatever part is broken, then find a way to get it fixed or get a replacement, and then put on the repaired part. That's what it all comes down to, you having confidence and feeling like you're able to go and explore remote places where you can't just rely on a mechanic to help you. If it's been helpful, please hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. Do you do all of your own work, or do you just pay and have someone else do it so that you can have more time to actually have adventures? I'm curious to hear how other people go about this. And this all has a lot of relevance for me because pretty soon here, I'm about to start building my new vehicle. It is exactly a week until I jump on a plane to fly to a new continent. I'm pinching myself, it doesn't feel real. And when I get there, I've got a vehicle lined up that I'll be building once again into amazing house on wheels. It's going to have drinking water and filtration, solar panels. Obviously I'll be upgrading the suspension, the wheels, the tires. It's got an awning. It's going to have a roof rack to carry some goodies that I want to have with me this time, and a few unexpected things that I've learned from my years on the road that I'm now incorporating into my latest vehicle build. So if you're interested to learn more about where I'm going, what vehicle I'm building, and the whys for all of this stuff, I'm posting it now over on Patreon. And all of these people are supporting me over there. Huge thanks to them. They help bring these videos to life, and they get all this behind the scenes content and all these special rewards and perks as a thank you for helping support me and get me back on the road, and so I can document not only the vehicle build, but also the big new expedition that's coming. So if you're interested, there's a link in the description. Head over to Patreon and you can see what it's all about over there. So thanks very much again for watching. Stay safe out there, and maybe I'll bump into you on the road.